Hello, everyone. Happy Tuesday. Welcome into another edition of GC Live. Not a football show today. This time, we're going to be talking a little bit of baseball. It's been a little while, and yeah, it's not baseball season right now, but it is the off season, and there has been a lot going on, and we need to talk about it. So I'm Jack Veltri, your host, as always, joined by my good friend, former right-handed pitcher for the Gamecocks in 2010, College World Series champion, my man Ethan Carter. Ethan, how we doing, buddy? It's been a little bit since we caught up. You having a good summer?
Yeah, man, it's been good. Trying to stay dry. You know, we get rain. It seems like every day between 4 and 7 o'clock. So it's made for a humid summer up here in Virginia. But yeah, man, all things considered, it's been a fun year. And as you mentioned, it's not a football show today, but we're inching closer to those wonderful Saturday afternoons again.
Yeah, now we're getting close. I believe we're now 40 days away from kickoff on August 31st. And, of course, there'll be plenty of football to discuss throughout the week here and then obviously going into the weeks to come till the season. But we are going to talk baseball today. We're going to get you caught up on what's been going on lately with the transfer portal. As it says in the title of this video, South Carolina's roster construction is basically complete at this point or almost near complete. I know there is one unannounced public commitment out there that I'm sure we'll find out eventually here in the coming days or maybe even hours when that becomes official. But yeah, we've got a lot to talk about, a lot to hit on. We did one of these about a month ago, and since then there's been a lot more movement, and the MLB draft took place last week. And Ethan, as I mentioned before the show to you, South Carolina had 5 players selected, all of which are going to sign and leave. Matthew Becker was one that we knew already when he was drafted that he was going to be signed just because he is, no longer, has no more eligibility left. So that was already a given. But then the other 4 players, Ethan Petrie, Nathan Hall, and then the 2 high school guys with Luke Roop and or Raup. I can't remember how you pronounce his name for sure. But then you have Noah Franklin too. So we know that the high school guys are going to be signing. And then Nathan Hall just signed yesterday. Haven't seen anything on Ethan Petrie yet. I'm sure they're just figuring out the number for what he's going to get paid. I think the slot value for him was like $2 million to the Nationals with the 49th pick. So those 4 guys plus Becker are all going to be leaving. Any surprises at all, really?
No surprises. I think if we had this conversation last year, we think Ethan would probably have been a first round pick, or in the top 32 picks. But it's still a monument to stay for him. And then those other guys, I think everybody, where we kind of envisioned them they would go. I think it's very interesting, with the high schoolers, how not freshman laden this team will be. I don't know if you have the number, but it's only a handful of freshmen will be on this team now, right?
Yeah, so we'll get into more of the roster breakdown here shortly, but
yeah,
to answer what you're saying, Ethan, South Carolina is only going to have 3 incoming freshmen for next season. So again, Franklin and Raup, they're both gone, so they're both signing. Yep. Those were 2 guys a part of the class of 2025 for South Carolina, but now you're going to have only 3 guys. And that was something Paul Mainieri was asked about in his offseason press conference last week, that, does it concern you at all that you only have 3 freshmen joining the team next year? And he truthfully just said, no, it's not really something he's overly concerned about. And I don't blame him. I think this is a team that is going to be a lot older, like you mentioned, and I think that benefits them in a lot of ways to where, they are going to be a really new team. Like, you only have like 10 guys returning for next season from the 2025 team. But, I mean, this is going to be a brand new team, but a lot of these guys have experience playing at other schools and even, being in the postseason and stuff. So I think that is going to help them greatly. But, again, with the draft and stuff, I can't say it's much of a surprise that Ethan Petrie, Nathan Hall, we both knew those 2 were going to be being drafted somewhere. It's just it was kind of the wait and see about where the other guys were. And quite honestly, I thought maybe there'd be a few more guys to be drafted. I had been told by a source that look out for guys like Bradley Hodges and Dawson Harmon, two of the new guys joining the team, as the biggest draft risks besides Petrie and Hall. And neither of those guys were drafted. Ant Phillips wasn't drafted, and he turned down a lot of money apparently to come to school. So point being, South Carolina is in pretty good shape for next season. I think when you came into the offseason, South Carolina was probably already planning for Petrie and Hall to not be back when they looked at, okay, how are we building this roster next year? It's not like with basketball with the outside chance of Colin Murray Boyles coming back to play for his junior year at South Carolina. And Lamont Paris openly said, they're leaving a roster spot open for Colin to come back, which, of course, he was drafted to the Raptors and is off to the NBA. But with baseball, you can be picked and still, decide to come back to school if you don't like your money you're getting or your pick or whatever that is. But with Petrie and Hall, you kind of knew like those two guys were definitely leaving for sure.
For sure. No, I'd been a part of that scenario twice with South Carolina. My freshman year, we thought Sam Dyson was going to sign with the A's, and Sam came back and was a huge part of us, winning that 2010 championship. And then again, when I was coming back from Lewisburg in would have been the 2012 season, but after the 2011 season, the 2011 draft, Matt Price had gotten drafted by the Orioles, and there was some talk that he was gonna go on, and he decided to want to come back and was going to start, and he started some of that year, and then he kind of transitioned back into his bullpen role. But yeah, these things happen like all the time, and so I think South Carolina is thankful, we should be thankful that not more guys had their name called and had that decision to make.
Yeah, and again, those two guys leaving, not a surprise. The other guys, not really a surprise either. I think you kind of knew they were going to lose some high school guys. And again, I don't think it's a big concern that you're losing a lot of freshmen. But as I mentioned before, this team really is going to be looking brand new at the time of us going live here on July 22nd. Again, there is one unannounced commitment that Terry Rooney, pitching coach for South Carolina, did post about the other day on Twitter, as he normally does when something like this happens. So right now they are up to 17 transfer commits, and that's without mentioning all the JUCO guys that are going to be coming in, the high school guys, and then you have the 10 returning players. So I believe you're up to about 38 players on the team, and rosters are going to have to go down to 34. But the cool thing is, and there's a little bit, I guess if you want to call it like a loophole or something. Paul was explaining it the other day, but there's this thing now where you can be a designated student athlete. So I guess you could still, the basic premise of it is that you could still be a part of the team and stuff, but you're, I guess, listed as a student athlete, I guess, if that makes sense. Like
it sounds like they're given a firm, it sounds like they're given a firm definition to a gray shirt now, finally, where gray shirt was just kind of a term used, and I know Rasul is going through some of that with a gray shirt year he took. So I know gray shirt was just kind of like this loose term. So maybe, being somebody designated a student athlete kind of gives more of a firm definition of what, you can be around the team, but, you can't be put on the roster when you go down to Florida to play one weekend.
No. So that's what it seems like. And Paul did say, before they got their latest commitment here with Bryce Navarre from Texas, that they had 3 players that are going to be, designated student athletes. One of them will be Brandon Cromer Jr., one of the freshmen joining the team. He underwent Tommy John surgery after his senior year at Lexington. So he's one of them. We don't know the other 2 yet. Paul did mention there's a pitcher with some lingering arm issues right now. So again, we don't know who that is either, but it's safe to assume maybe that pitcher will also be on this designated student athlete list.
Sure.
The point is, they have their roster at this point. They did say they were looking to add one more pitcher potentially, and they did that with Navarre from Texas. And now they've got someone else coming to South Carolina as well eventually once that becomes official. But, I mean, we talked about it a little bit back in June, and now we kind of know for sure what the roster looks like, where it stands. It's completely different. Me personally, I think this is a much improved group. I think it's going to be a team that is hitting for a lot more power, yet they're also going to have a nice blend of guys who have speed, can get on base, and that provides a lot of extra, run opportunities for the guys that can hit the long ball in the middle of the order. So I like that. And then we'll get into the pitching plenty throughout this video or this stream. But I do think the pitching on paper, you have some guys that I think are a little bit not questionable, but guys that are like, all right, they have had some issues at other schools, whether it's their ERAs are super high, their command has kind of been a little all over the place, their walks have been high. And I think if they get the right development, which is such a big key thing this year for South Carolina that we will certainly get into here, that something that I even asked Paul Mainieri about last week, if they can get the right development, they're going to be, I think, in a pretty good position to have a nice year next season.
Yeah, I think the roster has improved. And I think we're going to see some of this, more in college baseball where you're going to have these older teams with the transfer portal. It's not going to be nearly as imperative to have these strong freshman classes when you can go get guys that have been battle tested. And so I think, Coach Mainieri is even getting ahead of the curve a little bit on this, not leaning as much into an incoming freshman class and kind of leaning more towards, getting some veteran guys. But no, to your point, Jack, I think the offense is going to be improved. And, when it comes to the pitching, I know people have concerns about some of the guys coming in with the high, ERAs and some of the walk rates and things like that. But, these guys are I think the ceiling's far higher with this group. That I think that's what the takeaway you can have from this group to last year's group. The ceiling's higher. You have better stuff. You have some more. Whether they've had success all the time, you have some more battle tested guys that like you were saying, if the development's there, I think the staff can really make a big jump from just a stuff factor.
No, absolutely. And to start getting into some of what Paul Mainieri had to say, again, he spoke to the media for, I think it was 58 minutes the other day. So one of his longer press conferences, a lot of questions, and he basically just went through the entire team and kind of just listed, okay, here's what we like about them, et cetera, et cetera. So here's what Paul Mainieri had to say just about the overall roster and the way he's liking what they've got so far, this offseason.
Worked really hard on putting this new roster together, and I'm really excited. I think we came out of the draft Sunday and Monday about as well as we possibly could. Very excited. Feel very fortunate. We feel like we've got some good players lined up. It's a rather unique looking roster, and I'll explain in a moment why I say that. But, like I said, we were out there really looking at a lot of guys, and unfortunately we had a head start on our recruiting. Hopefully next year we won't be starting into it as early as we did this year. But I'm excited about our team. I think it's going to be a great group of kids. I feel like we're going to be significantly better next year in some ways, particularly on the pitching staff. We loaded up with some really good arms, some hard throwers, some very established college pitchers that went into the transfer portal, and feel very good about it. We worked really.
So again, that's what Paul Mainieri had to say about the way he feels about the roster at this time right now compared to, say like the end of the season. He feels about much better with where everything is at right now. And look, South Carolina put a lot of work into building this roster. This was a team, as we all know from last season, was just not very good. And, you went 6 wins in the SEC, missed the postseason by a wide margin, had one of the worst seasons in program history. You guys know the story by now. But rebuilding this roster, as Paul mentioned, took a lot of work. And he was even saying, him and his staff have barely been in Columbia this summer as they've been out on the road recruiting. I think at the time when he spoke with us, he said that Terry and Monty Lee were already on the road back out there recruiting, and their focus is kind of now shifted towards the class of 2026 with the high school guys and stuff, and trying to fill that out in 2027 as well. But no doubt, this roster is much better now than it was on May 20th when the season ended at the SEC tournament, wouldn't you say?
Yeah, I definitely think so. I think, and if anything, you have optimism about what these guys can be, because there are so many unknown quantities. But I think, I'm just kind of, perusing some of the guys. I just think the depth you got. I think these guys can go, 2 or 3 deep at certain spots now, where last year, if Ethan went down or if Nathan's hamstring acted up or, obviously Talmadge going down, there seemed to be a steep drop off after if there was any kind of nagging issue and a guy needed a day. So I just think primarily the roster is deeper, and I think, you'll be able to kind of weather some of those things that happen from anytime something comes up during the season. And I don't know about you, I just think that was a thing that this team couldn't get over. It's almost like they hit a wall, after a certain point.
Yeah, I mean, look, this roster, you mentioned depth. I'm glad you brought that word up, because I think specifically when it comes to pitching, I don't know if they'll be deeper in terms of like more talent or what have you, but I think at the very least, they're going to have arms that can go out there and certainly throw. So I think they got, look, they only had one left-handed pitcher returning for next season. That's Jake McCoy. You went out there, I believe you're up to 6 or 7 left-handed pitchers on staff right now, which is very good. And then you have a slew of new right-handed pitchers joining the mix with a lot of key guys that are coming back, including Parker Marlott, who is your top reliever from last season. Now, I mentioned this to you a moment ago, Ethan, and I'll ask, who are some of the guys that you look at this list of newcomers joining the team? I mean, who are some of the guys that, in your opinion, maybe even from a pitching standpoint, that really stick out to you the most, that you're like, okay, these guys can be day one impactful players?
I think the one that I look at the most, and it was my biggest pain point last season, Reese Moore from Iowa. I think getting him behind the plate and really be able to help the staff some. I know he was got as a DH last year, but I know just getting somebody that's handled a staff before, back behind the plate, that's going to help. I think Ant Phillips is huge. I think that's somebody that showed on the biggest stage that he can get the job done. That was, him going into that regional and just, kind of making a statement. I think that's a big one. And I also, one that I like, kid from UVA, Bradley Hodges. I think that is, he was coming off that Tommy John the year before. And so I know they monitored him pretty closely last year. And I know that, another year removed from that, I think you could see, him even take a big step this year, and really, solidify the staff a little bit. What about you? Who are your guys that you're looking at?
So, Brett, I mean, again, those are all really good names to mention there. I mean, Reese Moore, you're going to have a solidified day one catcher right there that should be starting if the season were to begin today. You're so much better from a catching standpoint, I think, right now. Obviously, losing Noah Franklin to the draft hurts, but having a guy like Reese Moore, who was a first-team All-Big Ten player last year, that's going to be nice, especially since he's someone that can hit and, like you said, manage a pitching staff. The one that really does stick out to me, and I'm going to say Ant Phillips first, and I'll get into an audio clip from Mainieri talking about him right in a few seconds here. But Ant, again, a guy that I think you look at Jake McCoy, he's definitely going to be in this weekend rotation, I think, for sure. You look at the other two spots in the rotation, kind of up for grabs right now, but I think someone that really has a real good chance to be maybe in that. Honestly, I think I could see him in that Friday slot. But worst case, Saturday or Sunday, I think you look at Amp as a guy that, like you said, he went to Clemson, struck out 9, walked 1 over 6 innings against a team that was hosting a regional this past year. And it's funny, I was catching up with him the other day. He didn't even start the year in the rotation at Upstate. He was their closer going into the middle of March. And that's when, I think he had like one outing where he gave Upstate 5 innings of relief. And that's when their head coach, Kane Sweeney, was like, hey, you're moving into the rotation. And that's a spot he held down to the entire year. And he caught the attention of a lot of people, including Paul Mainieri, who was watching that start he had at Clemson.
Very relieved after the draft because we sat on pins and needles worried about, a few of those guys. A couple of them were not draft eligible, so we didn't have, like Alex Philpott from Florida is not eligible for the draft, so we didn't have to worry about him. But there were others that we worried quite a bit about. For example, I don't know if you all watched the USC versus Clemson game in the first round of the NCAA tournament. Did you see that little pitcher he's not so little, but did you see that pitcher for USC? He pitched so great against Clemson. His name is Amp Phillips. Actually, his name is Ashton Michael Phillips, so that's how they came up with Amp. It's his initials. But everybody calls him Amp, except for his mother calls him Ashton. But to be honest with you, I was watching that game and I was like, man, see, now that's the kind of pitcher I would like to have. Just a really gutty competitor, threw strikes. He had good stuff. I think he was up to 94 miles an hour with most of his fastballs. Had a really good curveball. He was not a show-off on the mound, but he pitched with a lot of emotion. Well, lo and behold, the kid ends up going into the transfer portal. So I was like, we're going after that kid. And fortunately, we were able to land him. And he turned down a lot of money to stay in school. So we had to sweat that one out.
So, again, that's what Paul Mainieri had to say about Amp Phillips, right-hand pitcher from USC Upstate, joining South Carolina this year. And the other two names I was going to mention here that kind of really scouts me. There's a lot of hitters we could talk about being guys that stick out. Like you got Tyler Bach, you got from Wofford, you have Ethan Lozama, who's going to, I think, bring a lot of the power that we'll be missing with Ethan Petrie leaving the team. But I think Lozama is someone as a lefty. That's another thing. This team has so much more left-handed hitting that's something that Paul Mainieri wanted to really get for the outfield. And they were able to bring in 4 left-handed hitters as outfielders, which is going to be huge for this season. But from a pitching standpoint, we look at the bullpen. That was an issue for this team last year. Again, Parker Marlott, for as good as he was at times, and I think the ERA doesn't really tell the full story, but I mean, he was the team leader in ERA that was a little bit over 4. So this bullpen really struggled at times last year. And I think at the back end specifically, we're going to be looking at a pair of guys that I think really could be maybe your 8th, 9th inning kind of guys. And I think that's probably going to be Josh Gregoire from ULM. And then another name that maybe he was an early transfer commit for South Carolina way back in June. But I think Cullen Horowitz could be someone that, his story is interesting because he didn't start pitching full-time until last year. So, he was at Samford. He wanted to start pitching a little bit, and, Samford kind of tried it out. It worked, and he was still a two-way player all of last year. But, this past summer, he was really starting to get more into pitching, and he's now up to 98, 99 miles an hour. And that's the main thing. South Carolina is going to have guys that throw hard. And you got to obviously get a little bit more of the command and development for Horowitz under wraps and kind of get that figured out. But you're looking at 2 guys that between him and Gregoire, I think that could be your 8th and 9th inning guys, along with Marlott, who could easily pitch in the 8th and 9th inning as well. Maybe he's your setup guy going into the 7th inning. We'll see.
Yeah, for sure. And another name that Coach mentioned, Alex Philpott from Florida.
Yeah.
That's a guy with pedigree. That's a big kid. He's striking out more than 1 an inning. And I know, trust me, everybody that's watching and listening to us, I know when you see these big ERAs, you get why do we go get this guy?
Yeah.
As a reliever, you do not build the innings to. If you have 2 bad outings, your ERA is cooked for at least another 40 innings. So if you only throw, I'm looking at Phil Potts now. If you throw 37 innings, you're gonna be fighting a high ERA. But the numbers kind of bear out that he misses bats, he throws hard, and that those are the kind of things you need out of a bullpen that, quite frankly, didn't miss enough bats last year. They relied a lot on contact and trying to get double plays and ground balls, and that's a hard recipe for winning in such a competitive league as the SEC. You've got to have some guys that can miss some bats, and I think Coach Rooney, I think Coach Mainieri and Coach Lee, they made a point to go out there and get guys that throw hard, have good pitches. Again, you mentioned Colin Horowitz, Alex Philpott, these guys, they throw gas. Like they are up there and they know one thing to do, and that's to throw the ball, hard and try to throw it past you. So I think just having that mentality in there too is gonna help, you take on the mentality of your leaders on the team. And I think if you have more guys that have that more bulldog mentality, I think that will just kind of, permeate throughout the pitching staff, and you'll have more hive mindset when it comes to that.
Now, you mentioned the word gas and guys throwing harder and stuff, and that's a really exciting prospect to think about. That South Carolina, while they didn't have a lot of hard throwers last year, and I think that I don't think it was a big deal that they didn't have a lot of hard throwers. I mean, these guys, didn't matter if they were throwing upper 90s. They were getting hit around really hard last year. But you go out there and you get a ton of guys who are throwing. You see Elijah Foster throws 95, 97. Colin Horowitz throws upper 90s. Josh Gregoire is throwing in the 90s too. So many different guys that you're getting have that upper 90 velo that Mainieri spoke so adamantly about going out and getting in the transfer portal, because the two things that he really wanted, guys that throw hard and guys that are going to hit the ball a long way. That's what he's got. Now, with the pitching, because this leads us into probably the last point we'll make about the pitching before we switch over to anything having to do with the position players and whatnot, this is probably the biggest thing I see whenever South Carolina lands a pitcher in the portal this year is, all right, it's great, it looks like a good pitcher, but how are they going to be developed? Because I think that's something that we know the elephant in the room. The development was just not where it apparently needed to be last year with TrackMan, and we've talked about that stuff plenty before. Stuff that you guys are listening already well know about. But point being, how is the development going to be this year? And that's something that I made a point to ask Paul about when we spoke with him last week. Of okay, you have a lot of pitchers. Some of them are probably having a little bit more of command things that need to be worked out compared to others. Like you already have some established pitchers joining the team, but a lot of them you see have the high ERAs, the high walk numbers. What are the ways you go about developing these guys to make sure you get the most out of them? This is a long answer he gave me, but it's about 4 minutes, but I'm going to play the entire clip and we'll get into, more of talking about it after it's over.
Well, first of all, we focused on stuff. We needed to get some harder throwers and guys with, good breaking balls and things like that. So, Jack, I don't know who you're specifically talking about there. Maybe a guy like Elijah Foster, but he's got a great arm, and his off-speed pitches are pretty good too. He's just got to learn to command them a little bit. Sometimes that just comes with experience and age. Terry and Chris Gordon working together with them, they're going to work really hard with those guys all fall and do the things that are necessary. We have all the technology. We have everything available to us to help these kids develop into the very best pitchers that they can be. And obviously pitching was a weakness for us last year. The guys that are back with us, we think are going to contribute in a big way. We spoke about Riley Goodman. I haven't talked about Jake McCoy at all, but Jake was the guy that had control problems last year. Let's not hide that fact, right? His first start in the Cape this summer, he went 4 innings, he struck out 10 and walked 0. His next start, he went 4 innings, he struck out 7, he walked 1. His third start was not quite as dominating as the first two. The first two made him the Cape Cod League Pitcher of the Week. The third start, they got a few hits off him. There's no question that Jake's got to continue to develop his changeup to become the best all-around pitcher that he can be. But he's showing what he's capable of being. And my feeling is that this third year is going to be magical for him. Listen, I had a pitcher back at Notre Dame, just to use as an example, by the name of Brad Lidge. I don't know if all of you remember that name. Brad Lidge threw 5 innings his freshman year. His sophomore year, he threw 45 innings. And then his junior year, he was the Big East Pitcher of the Year, a first-round draft choice, ended up spending 12 years or more in the big leagues, and closed out 48 games for the Phillies when they won the World Championship. I mean, sometimes it just takes guys time to get the feel and the confidence and everything for what it takes to have really good command. And obviously the pitching coach is a big part of that. The director of player development with all the metrics and so forth, that can contribute into it as well. But sometimes it just takes time for kids. One of the greatest left-handed pitchers of all time, Sandy Koufax, didn't develop good command until he was 26 years old. I mean, everybody's different. But we have a plan, and we're working with them. We'll be working with them when we're allowed to start working with them. But what we did was, hey, look, I think Ant Phillips is a proven winner. I think that Josh Gregoire is a proven winner. Alex Valentin is a proven winner. Bradley Hodges is a proven winner. They've shown they can do it. Now it's just a matter of them doing it consistently. And I think we're going to have a good pitching staff. We mentioned Riley Goodman. Brandon Stone is getting himself in the best shape of his life, and he's going to throw harder. And he showed what he's capable of doing against Ole Miss this past year. You just got to do it more consistently. We know what Parker Marlott is. Hey, Zach Russell and Cooper Parks have good arms, and now it's time for those guys to make a leap forward. And if they can do it, we got something special there too. So, looking forward to working with these guys. I think we're.
So again, very long answer there from Paul. That was kind of how a lot of the press conference went. Was quick, easy question, and then long answer. But that's the status quo there with Paul. The main thing I take away from what he had to say there was the thing that you needed to hear, because you don't want it falling on deaf ears there that he didn't address it. That, quote, we have all the technology, we have everything available to help us, or to us, to help these kids develop into the very best pitchers that they can be. I think that is really, I mean, again, I don't want to say it's encouraging to hear that, because it's like you've had TrackMan for years now. You have the Maven system that you are literally paying for. And so, again, we've seen the reports out there. We've heard the stories and stuff. Whether they were using the technology to the best of their ability or not, you have to be able to use it to its full extent and see, how you can develop and stuff. I mean, you guys didn't have stuff like this 15 years ago.
I wish.
When you were pitching. So I'm sure, as we all know, using it is beneficial. And so putting that out there, saying that, and then also the fact of Terry Rooney, Chris Gordon are going to get right to work with these guys when the fall gets going, because they won't be really starting their fall until midway through October with their first scrimmage and whatnot. So I think it's all encouraging to hear. Now it's just about going out there, using all that stuff that you have, all the resources, and putting it to good use. And if you're putting it to good use, I can imagine the results are going to be a lot better than what we saw last year with the worst ERA in program history.
Yeah, absolutely. No, I mean, again, I liked, hearing him talk, about it. It does take guys time. This isn't necessarily football or basketball where you're going to have a 5-star kid come in and completely, come out from day one and going to be a superstar. It takes hundreds and thousands of at-bats for guys to get to their finished products. And pitchers, it takes, hours and hours and hours of work and repetition and those small things that it doesn't. Some guys are just, incredibly gifted and it clicked for them overnight. And you know what? That is what it is. But, other guys, are Michael Rolfe, who was a first baseman, DH his first year, then, pitched a little bit in relief and then was a reliever his second year and then started a game in the World Series. And now he has a bullpen named after him. You know what I mean? Like, it's not everything is as quick and easy as we as fans want it to be. So I like that coach, some of these guys, we do hope they take a step. We do hope Jake McCoy, takes a step from last year, because we definitely see what's what the potential is, and same with Brandon Stone and some of these other guys. So I think coach is saying all the right things. To go back to something you said, so you said they're not starting until October this year?
Yeah, so October 19th is going to be their first real scrimmage. Again, the format of the way things are going to look this year is kind of different. So the focus seems to be a lot more. I'm going to pull up. I don't have the audio clip here, but so we know for 2 dates for sure is, October 19th is going to be their first real scrimmage. They'll have a scrimmage here in Columbia against UNC Charlotte on November 2nd. And then November 6th, they're going to play Charleston, where they'll play in Charleston, whether it's at Joe Riley or COC is to be determined. But they'll practice up until Thanksgiving. And if you go back to last year, they only practiced from like September 30th, probably until that first week of November. So the way they're going to do it this year is they're going to focus a lot more on, they'll scrimmage less frequently. So 3 days a week. And the hope is to play 9-inning games and have 6 pitchers throw each day. And so that'd be 3 per team. And it's better for them to have them throwing 3 innings apiece rather than 1-inning outings as they build their arms up. Because last year what we saw was a lot of 2-3 inning games at the beginning of the fall. And then they slowly, gradually move into those 9-inning outings and stuff. And I think it's a lot better for these guys to have more innings under their belt with going 3 innings apiece, and a lot more pitchers get used and stuff. So I'm liking the difference. I'm liking the overall acknowledgement that, like, he didn't outwardly say that, like, we didn't use technology last year or we just weren't really he didn't bring up the fact of, like, okay, here's what went wrong last year. But in a way he kind of did, in that we have the technology, we're going to use it. And then you also have him going out there and kind of changing his method of how he does the fall from how it normally is for him. I think that's a sign of encouragement in a lot of ways of, the results on the field weren't great last year, so we're going to change some things up in hopes of being a lot better next year, in addition to all the new players that are joining the team.
Yeah, it seems like he's not, it's not like, well, my way works. We just didn't have the right players, so we're going to do my way again this year. There is acknowledgement without outright coming out and saying, it was a, abject disaster. There's an acknowledgement from the staff that, okay, we need to tweak some things the way we're doing it. And I wanted to make sure that I heard you right, because I'm with you. I like that. I hope they, spend some time, using that technology for, August and September. While guys get in, they're getting their bodies right, because some guys took some time off, some guys were playing in their summer leagues. There needs to be kind of a recalibration process for a lot of these guys. So I think, taking I don't know when guys report anymore, but that half of August and then all of September, and taking that time to get in the weight room, get your bodies right, get used to some baseball movements, and then midway through September, you start playing some games. I think that's I like the approach they're taking this fall. So I'm with you. I think it's the changes that are needed, or I say needed. I think changes are being made, and I think those changes can definitely have a positive impact on this club going forward.
No, for sure. I absolutely agree with you. Change can be for the best sometimes, and in this case, when you have the year that you did last year, it's quite evident that changes needed to be made, and they didn't come on the coaching staff. Obviously, that was not going to happen, but more so, like, philosophical changes of, okay, how's your philosophy, the methods that you're doing, and how you go about the regimen with practice, and putting more time in the weight room too seems to be another big thing that they're doing. Before we get into the position players and kind of wrapping it up here in a little bit, I want to talk to you guys real quick about our main show sponsor, right above us here, Clint Hammond of CMG Home Loans. If you're in the market to buy a home right now, or you need help with your mortgage, but you don't know where to begin, it can be a really complicated process, trust me. But Clint is a guy that can go ahead and help you out. He's been in the mortgage industry for more than 20 years at this point. He's also a lifelong Gamecock fan and a longtime supporter of Gamecock Central. So you know immediately you're in the right hands with someone like him. He'll help you, take you through the process step by step, and get you on that way to whether it's helping you with your mortgage or buying your dream home that you've always desired. So if you're interested and you like what you're hearing, give him a call, 803-422-6797. The NMLS number for him is 71597, or you can go to clinthammond.com for more info. And again, Clint's the man. He'll help you out through the entire process and get you going on the right track. And that information will be above us here on screen all show long. All right, Ethan, we've talked enough about the pitching at nauseum now. Let's go ahead and we've talked a little bit about some of the transfers joining the team from the position player side of things. We know the outfield's going to look entirely different. We know they've added 2 catchers out of the portal here with Reese Moore and Jake Randolph from Presbyterian. The infield in a lot of ways could also look very different next year. And one thing that we had seen here in the summer was that KJ Scobie, South Carolina's star freshman third baseman this past year, who was a wizard over there at the hot corner as a defender, he has been playing shortstop this summer. He started out with Lexington County Blowfish, playing shortstop for them for a few games. Then he gets an invite to Team USA collegiate training camp out in Cary, North Carolina. And Mainieri was very adamant about trying to get him an invite out there. And, of course, Scobie was invited. Unfortunately, he did not make the national collegiate team, as I think there were like over 50 players invited, but only 26, I think, get the official invitation to come join the team. But point is, Scobie has been playing shortstop all summer, and so it begs the question, will KJ be the starting shortstop, or will he at least be playing shortstop for South Carolina next season? Here is what Paul Mainieri had to say about that.
To answer your question, I'm going to look at him as he's going to go right to shortstop. And there'll be competition. I mean, we've got a couple of kids, like Eric Parker coming in, Jack Reynolds coming in. I mean, there's going to be other competition out there. But, I think Scobie's going to be have a good chance to end up there. I told Scobie, though, that what he has to do is root for somebody really to step up at third base so I don't have to move him back to third base. And if somebody else emerges and plays really great at third, there's a good chance that Scobie will end up at short.
So, again, that's what Paul Mainieri had to say about the possibility of KJ Scobie playing shortstop for the Gamecocks next year. It's something that it was a much longer answer to the question I asked, and I just cut it down to kind of get to the point of like, hey, KJ most likely going to be playing shortstop. But in the longer answer that he initially gave, he didn't realize that KJ could play shortstop. It was something where he kind of just threw him at third, and it worked out really well. And obviously, I think it's more important to have even Paul said it. It's more important to have a really solid third baseman out there, because you don't know that you don't have one until you don't. It's such a valuable position over there, and we saw the impact of what having a lackluster situation at third base could do to a team when the 2024 South Carolina team had so many issues at third base with guys like Lee Croy, who made a string of errors. You had Lee Ellis make some critical errors, and you've had to revamp third base. KJ was great there last year, and it looks like he'll be moving over to shortstop. I want to play one other clip real quick on the third base situation, speaking of it, and then we'll get into a full breakdown of the left side of the infield. But here's what Paul Mainieri had to say. If KJ's playing short, who's going to be playing third?
We recruited 2 infielders, junior college infielders. Both of them played third base for their teams, and both of them were first-team junior college All-Americans. So one of them is Patrick Evans from Florence Darlington Tech, and I think Patrick is just a really great ball player, all-around player, and he could probably play anywhere on the infield. We'll line him up at third base against Dawson Harmon, who is the other one, and we'll see who can handle the defense there. And if one of them is superior to the other, then we'll start looking at the other one at another position, somewhere on the field. But I'm excited about having Patrick Evans. He's in summer school here with us already. He could have potentially been drafted yesterday, but also set a number high enough that he wouldn't get it so that he would come to school. And I could say the same thing about Dawson Harmon. Dawson Harmon, it was the Florida Junior College Player of the Year. Hit 24 home runs. So, power was a big focus for our recruiting class. He had 24 home runs. I think we satisfied that with him, as well as Caleb Hoover and some of the other guys. Harmon was also, like I said, first-team All-American. So that'll be interesting competition there.
So, again, Paul Mainieri talking about the potential of who plays third base if KJ Scobie does indeed slide over to shortstop full-time next season. Again, he mentioned it, that KJ is going to have to root for somebody to get a hold of that job at third base, so that way he's the full-time shortstop next season. And I don't know if you're going to find anyone that has as good of defense as KJ did last year. I mean, he was phenomenal at third base. I think he only made like 2 errors. So he was really sharp over there. And we've seen what a good third baseman looks like defensively for South Carolina, what kind of difference that makes. Obviously, shortstop with Henry Kazmar was a little bit of a mixed bag at first, but I think once he kind of got settled at South Carolina, he was much better defensively as a shortstop. And, of course, he returned to Ohio State after entering the transfer portal. So he's no longer here. You thought maybe, okay, Eric Parker, Jack Reynolds, new guys joining the team. Maybe if KJ's playing third, those guys will get shortstop. But it looks like for the time being, going into the fall at least, KJ Scobie's going to be at shortstop, and then you have an open competition at third base. Your thoughts?
Yeah, I think it's good to have competition everywhere. I think Eric Parker was a highly recruited high school player just 2 years ago. So I think having that competition with him and KJ at shortstop, and then because again KJ worst case scenario can fall back and go to third base. Because what you hope for is all these guys go out there and hit it a bunch and make the decisions very hard for the coaching staff. So, but it's encouraging to hear coach talk about those JUCO guys that could possibly come in and take third base over from KJ and provide some pop there. But I think it's exciting for KJ, to come in and start at the hot corner your freshman year and then get moved over to the leader of the defense over there at shortstop. I think it shows the confidence that this coaching staff has in him, and also why it was such a priority for them to make sure that he, didn't leave the Garnet in black, for the transfer portal. So I think it's working out well, and I think that I think being with those guys at the USA, the USA camps was a great learning experience, and you can kind of see how some of the other best in the country do it. So I think it's been a great last 8-9 months for KJ Scobie, and I hope it keeps going, and that confidence continues to build, and all things go well, then he's your next shortstop at South Carolina, and then you're trying to figure out some other spots to get some guys in. But the biggest thing, I'll stop rambling. Provides flexibility. Defensive flexibility is big. If you got one of these mashers on the bench that can come in and pinch hit for somebody, then, you can move, KJ around anywhere you need to. So it's again, goes back to what we talked about at the beginning of the show. Depth.
Yeah, and that's the main thing with this move, I think, that makes the most sense is you move KJ to short. That frees up a really important corner infield spot because you have Bo Hollins at first base. And the reason I mentioned Bo is not because his job is up in the air. He's going to be the starting first baseman if the season were to start today for South Carolina. Like, he's a really exciting player to watch. I think he showed some really good things last season. The reason I bring up the first base spot is because you brought in a lot of guys out of the portal and even in from the JUCO ranks that play the corner infield spots. And so you have first base already logged down. We thought KJ might be the third baseman going into next season. That was until the summer started and he was playing shortstop. Now you have an open spot in the infield for, like you said, if you need to pinch hit someone late in the game, like I think Logan Sutter is going to be in the starting lineup every day, but like a Caleb Hoover or Dawson Harmon, one of these guys that Patrick Evans, one of these guys that maybe won't, start right away, but if you need someone late in the game to come up with a big at bat or something, or just to create more competition, you have the ability to put and plug and play some of these guys that are mainly just corner infielders. And that's the thing I think with this team is not just depth on the pitching staff, but they'll have a lot of guys that they're going to be too many guys on this team to where it's like you just don't have enough starting spots for everybody.
Right.
Like, I think we can probably assume Tyler Bach's probably going to be your starting center fielder. Ethan Lazamba will hone down one of those corner outfield spots. We'll see who else is in the outfield to go along with them. You have Bo Hollins at first, Reese Moore behind the plate. Second base, I feel like, is a little bit open as well, but I do think ultimately Will Craddock, a shortstop, he does play shortstop, but he can also play second. He's a freshman from TL Hanna, who Paul spoke very highly of as someone who could provide a little bit of pop in the lineup. And second base is another spot that will be open with Jordan Carry-On out of eligibility, shortstop KJ. Yep. And then third base really could go either way, but you have a lot of options there. So I feel like you got your team. You have your potential starters. But that's a lot of guys you have on the bench that are going to provide a lot of hitting ability or just, late game. You need a defensive replacement, someone to pinch hit. I like the bench that you have as well. If the season were to start today, you're feeling very good about where this roster is on paper right now. It's a much different state than where this team was 2 months ago, I would say.
Yeah, no, I mean, you're not, clutching your head if somebody has to miss a week or two. The season's long. These guys are not robots. So, these injuries happen. Nicks come up, tight hamstrings, tight quads, these things happen. So, when you can, like I said, just use an example, when you can go, to, Logan Sutter, who, again, is probably going to play every day, but, he goes down and maybe has a quad or something, then, you can bring, just pick a name. You can bring Luke Yazus off, and have him DH one day. You have different ways to make the roster work and not feel like, well, now, the bottom third of our lineup, what are we going to do? We're really swimming upstream here. I just think from a pure roster construction standpoint, this team is far better situated to be good, throughout and not have to run the risk of, just, flaming out once things get tough.
So I'm going to wrap on this with our discussion today as we're approaching almost the hour mark of this live. Is again, we're only doing this a few times this summer, so we're really getting caught up on everything that's been going on these last few weeks. But a really early, probably way too early type of question. I'm not going to ask for a record prediction or anything, but
sure,
if you had to pick like a target goal to shoot for in terms of like what defines a successful season for South Carolina in 2026, what is a step in the right direction for this program? Is it because obviously you go from 6 wins to making the postseason next year? That's probably about at minimum about 12 to 13 wins in conference play. That's going to be a big jump for this team, but if you're looking at a successful year, what do you consider it for them in terms of step in the right direction? Is it just simply making the postseason? Is it going on a nice run and getting to a super, going home? Like, what do we consider a positive year for this program next year? As there's going to be a lot of expectations and a lot on the line for this team, because if they have another bad year like they did in 2025, we could potentially see some changes made if things are really, really bad.
I think a baseline for this team is the playoff or is the postseason. I think that is a baseline of success, especially playing in the SEC. I think the SEC set the record for most conference or most teams in a conference to make the postseason this past year. I think at a baseline you've got to make the tournament. I would love to see them get back to hosting. I think this team has the potential for that. But to your point, just making the jump from 6 wins to postseason is a large jump, for a team like this. So I think a step in the right direction, positive momentum would be making the playoffs or making the postseason and at least pushing whoever the host is to make the regional final. I think that is the line of success for this program next year. Make the regional final, then you're a win or two from a super, and then we got some things to build on with recruiting and things like that. But I think that's where I want to set it at. Be in the regional final next year.
I'll say this, and I totally agree with you. I think at the bare minimum, make the postseason. Like, I don't know if it's really early to say what this team is capable of, because on paper, they are significantly better than last year, I think you're going to have a team that should be, if the guys all kind of click the way they have done in the past at other schools and stuff, if they can kind of come together and get this thing right, I think we look at a team that is probably hitting closer to 100 home runs next year. And that's about a 50 home run jump compared to last year. I mean, that's exponentially going to make a big difference. And I think we see a team that probably slugs a little bit more too. And then pitching-wise, it cannot get worse than last year, I don't think.
No, it can't.
If that team ERA is in the 5s even, I think you're feeling a lot better about where things are at. Because, again, ERA is a stat that you got to take it with a little bit of grain of salt. Because like you mentioned before, Ethan, a relief pitcher comes in and gets shelled in 2 outings, that ERA is going sky high. And it's a reflection on the rest of the pitching staff, ERA as a whole. So I think if you're anywhere around that, I'm not saying it's going to happen, that they're going to hit 100 home runs or their team ERA is going to be much lower compared to last year. But if it's anywhere near close, I think this team is going to get into the postseason for sure. And I think they definitely could push for a regional host, being one of the top 16 seeds. That's a tough thing to do, especially in the SEC, because guess what? Every other program has reloaded in this conference. So South Carolina's not the only one that I think has gotten better this offseason. But to get to the postseason would be a really nice step in the right direction. And I think I would take a little bit of the pressure off Paul Mainieri and the coaching staff after they got a lot of heat towards the end of this past season, where we're talking about every week, okay, is Paul the right man for the job? Is he going to be around next year? We know he is. And now going to the postseason in year 2, this is a program that has a lot of history, has been to the College World Series, won it a few times now. So the expectations are always going to be high. But I think realistically, if we're talking about, okay, what is that next step in the right direction? Year 2, get to the postseason and go from there. And even if you don't make a regional final, I still feel like in a lot of ways, I think people could be okay with the fact of, all right, this was a pretty successful year, given that they're probably going to win a lot of games. They may have a winning record, and then they get to the postseason and go from there. So it's very early. We'll have a better answer of this when we re-up this in the fall and stuff, and we get to see these guys in action as the season gets closer. But on paper, man, I'm more excited about this roster right now than I was a few months ago. I think this is a team that needs new life, and they're going to be losing a few guys, right? No more Ethan Petrie, no more Nathan Hall. No more of these guys that we've come to know from the Kingston years and stuff. It's a really new group, but it's one that if everything goes the way that people hope it will, if things go the right way, this is a team that should be a lot more exciting to watch around this time next year.
Yeah, it is officially the dawn of a new era. I know Coach Mainieri's first season was last year, but this is his first year with, I'd say, 95% of his guys. So it is officially, without a shadow of a doubt, the Paul Mainieri era, and I'm excited to see what comes of that with all these new guys. And I, like you said, just on paper, there should be a lot of excitement around it. I think you're going to see a more exciting brand of baseball, moving forward.
And that's something to really get energized about. So again, the season is still a very long time away. February 13th is opening day. So the day before Valentine's Day on February 13th, that Friday. Don't know who they'll be playing yet, but that is officially going to be opening day for South Carolina. And then the fall will get going here in a few, probably about 2 months from now. We'll be talking about the fall and stuff, but it's going to move by quick, and we got football season to kind of hold us over until then. So, Ethan, before we get out of here, it's been good talking to you, my friend. But any final things from just this discussion? Anything that you feel like we haven't touched on yet?
No, man. I think we did a real good job in our hour of kind of touching on all the stuff. I think like I said, I think it's just going to be a better brand of baseball, throughout. I think it's going to be exciting. I think you're going to have some guys some returning guys have some chips on their shoulder, and then you're going to have some older, just veteran players that know how to go about their business. And I think that's gonna really help this program take a step in the right direction and get back to where we all want and expect it to be.
Yep. Again, couldn't have said it any better. So it's been fun doing this, man. We'll definitely catch up again soon as the fall gets closer and we have more baseball to talk about. But we're in football season right now. So
yes, sir.
It's going to be a lot of fun. So appreciate you guys joining us. As always, again, go ahead and follow us on Gamecock Central. You can follow Ethan on Twitter and Instagram at _train32 and me, Jack T. Veltri, on Twitter. So appreciate you guys tuning in as always. For Ethan Carter, I'm Jack Veltri. Appreciate you guys, and we'll see you next time. Bye.